So it's like 2 a.m. and I'm feeling horrible. So we'll see how this goes. But I've just done the numbers and I'd really like to get this video out as soon as possible. So this video is just going to go over how CCP's changes to the assault frigates does not fix the inherent issues with them. It doesn't nerf them properly. It doesn't change the ones that don't need nerfing properly. And it's just generally a bad fix. It creates some new issues, and I don't think that it's a good example of a balance change. So just a quick thing on all these fits don't have links, implants, drugs, anything. This is just the ship. Some of them you would run with implants, some probably not. The retribution, I've got nice and cheap fits. The rest are all cheap except Kiki's expensive and Crusader's expensive. But overall, it's just generally a lot of fits that are based on what you see small gang groups use. So starting with the Kikimora, currently out of factory point range, got 267 DPS, 3200 meters a second, 107 sig, decent capacitor, lasts about a minute even running the VEP. Without running the VEP, your cap's stable. It is quite tight and fitting. It's got like less than one power grid and perfect on CPU, but I think it provides a good example of a decently balanced ship that's maybe slightly too powerful. Now, if you look at the cheap version has a bit less cap. It's not cap stable even without running the rep. About 70 meters slower and about 22 DPS less. It's still got very good projection, slightly less point range obviously. It's a lot cheaper, 225 to 65, but thing is, if you look at the changes CCP want to make, so 2900 meters a second for a retribution. This is for a nice fit one, which is really not very okay at all. That's way too slow. With snakes, the nice fit, it'll go about 4k a second, which is about what you really want to be going for when you're on messy grids. The cheap fit retribution, on the other hand, that goes 2836 or 2838, which is like even worse. It's really not great. Now, saying that, I do agree that the retribution does need a slight balancing change. And initially, when I looked at options, my first thought was change the rate of fire bonus to a damage bonus, and then change the capacitor so it's about even. Now, that's after some discussion on some discords, Tusker's Discord and stuff. In the end, I think a better change is to actually go with a 10% bonus to damage, updating the existing 5%, and then just removing rate of fire bonus entirely. This gives about a 10% DPS reduction, so 267 goes to 241, and 245 goes to 221. And then keeping the old speed, because I think that it nerfs it slightly in its existing role as great anti-support, anti-tackle, but it's still very strong then, it's still fast enough to stay on grid there, while really hurting its ability to kill cruisers and bigger, because 267 DPS is quite a bit for a frigate. Now, obviously, not everyone runs exactly these fits. Some people run single heatsink with the ADCU. I have lots of thoughts on the ADCU, but the retribution isn't a horrible it's not a horrible ship with it, and those ships do lose a lot of DPS. This single compact, with my change, it being 195, which is obviously not very much, but I do think it does strike a good balance there. There's also a change in the cap, so it's nerfed just a bit. Numbers in the end are quite similar to what they already are, like in how long it lasts, but it just makes it a little bit weaker. It stops it from being stronger when having no rate of fire bonus on the lasers. Second ship I want to look at is the Wolf. Now, the Wolf 3773 meters a second. It's a single nano double T cheap fit. Some people run double nano, double gyro, lots of different fitting options. I think this is just a really popular one. 1400 alpha, 200 DPS. I think the Wolf is fine as it is. It doesn't need a change. If you update with CCP's change to 3400, it's still quite fast. Especially if you snake it, but it's a cheap ship. You don't really want to be running snakes necessarily, especially in nullsec. I just think it doesn't need a change at all. I think it's very strong as it is, but I don't think it's oppressively strong. And especially in gangs, like, your DPS is fine, but your volley is great, and I think it just provides a really good option there. Also of note, its range 8.7 plus 21. It's obviously a lot less than a retribution. Like, this is with the EMP, obviously you get a bit more range with other ammo. It's still, especially if you don't want to be in scam range, you do lose a lot of that DPS. Out to point range, you've got probably about 130, 140, so you do lose quite a bit, but at the same time, it's just how projectiles are balanced. Also of note, 127 tracking, retribution slightly worse, but it's still very similar. That'll be important later. Now if we go on to the Ramjag. This is an existing Ramjag. This is a full compact one, except T2 ADCU. 375 DPS tank without the ADCU running, without heat. Now, I think that's absurd. It also goes like 4100 meters a second. With CCP's change, it would go 37, 33, which I do agree with. I think that's a good speed. It's about pre-nerf Wolf speed. But I don't think it fixes anything because you've got plenty of fitting here and you completely nuke existing solo fits if you nerf the fitting, because obviously you need weapons in the highs, rocket launchers. Now, one change that I did see thrown around, not by CCP but by other users, was a single MASB when you have ADCU. The issue with that is you just fit an MSC, and yeah, you're slightly over, but you're well within like rolling range for those two mods, the MWD MSC or even the NOS, to reduce power grid, and you're then within. You got way more defense against being volleyed, and you do lose a lot of tank, but it's not oppressively much more tank that you lose, and you still tackle things with like super easily. Instead, what I think the change should be is a removal of the shield boost bonus, and replace that with a damage bonus. So what this does is it means that your double MASB Wolf 273 or 275, whatever, still quite good tank, especially before heat, but it's a lot less oppressive, especially with the speed nerf as well. Whereas the MSE fit, that only has 136 before heat, which is obviously not fantastic, and you can burn through that Wolf a lot quicker. Speed 3700, it's about the same as a pre-nerf Wolf, as I said. It's still very good, but it's not oppressively good. It's still slower than Interceptors. I'm just going to skip Kicking Wolf for now. I'm going to look at the Claw. So the Claw, less range. So this is a pre-buff Claw. Got 800 volley, 160 DPS. It fits barely, incredibly tight, but it does fit at least. Without the armor rep running, it is cap stable, so it's got okay cap. The point does only have 22Ks, but it's with the range that you've actually got on the ship, that's fine. That's like end of first fall off. And I think this represents a good alternative. It's faster than the Wolf, 4,500 meters a second, compared to the Wolf, which even pre-nerf is still like 800 meters a second slower, or whatever. A lot less HP, but obviously the idea is you don't take damage. Also of note is the Wolf has 90, 67, 25, 10. The Claw has 70, 35, 25, 10. I think these two resists are actually the more important ones anyway. Obviously a lot of Cold Dali ships have either a hard kinetic lock or a soft one like the Navy Osprey, where you get a bit more kinetic damage. Obviously that's with Rapid Lights, which really hurts. And then Explosive, obviously that's Warriors, which are going to be the most dangerous drones because they're the only ones that can really keep up with you. Which that affects you regardless of whether you're using a Wolf or a Claw anyway. And then the Crusader Crusader needs power grid a lot, like a 20% buff to power grid. The issue with, well, the Crusader works with, if you get the power grid, it's a lot faster than Retribution. Even pre-nerf Retribution, it's still like 1300 meters a second faster, still aligns faster. The capacitor isn't quite as good, even with the nice fit, it's not stable, but it's fine. 11 minutes, it's like plenty of time. The DPS is a bit lower, but I'll get onto that in a minute. And the tracking is a bit better. It's not a lot better, but it is a bit better. In return, the range is a bit shorter, and it's noticeably shorter. You lose 2 kilometers even with standard, compared to Retribution X-Ray. But I do think it provides a good example of a balance. It's a faster, better tracking version of Retribution. In return, it has the worst cap, it doesn't have the range, and it does a bit less damage. Now, if we go back to the claw, if we update it to the new stats, the 1000 volley, 200 DPS, so it's about 40% worse than a RT Wolf, but it's still quite good, and you could still do claw gangs very easily. And obviously, more fitting means you can go T2 point, T2 gyros. More power grid isn't really needed for this fit. It does mean you don't need like rig skills to 5, which can be somewhat irritating. But I think with the damage bonus, the claw's actually going to be quite decent. If anything, it could maybe do with an EHP buff. Now, if you go to the buffed Crusader, 180 DPS, so it's less than the claw, obviously a lot less volley. But on the other hand, it does track a bit better than the claw. It does have a bit better range where it can actually apply that 180 DPS, and it's a little bit slower, but it's very similar, and it's obviously got a bit less cap. But I do think it provides a good balance where it tracks better, does a bit less damage, bit of optimal, very similar speed. Obviously less volley as well, but I think that's fine. I think the bonus for these two is fine as long as it gets that power grid. But then we go on to the worst balance ship of all, the Kikimora. It's got 2 fits here. This is sort of a slower fit. I've seen slightly different mids, but I've seen variants of this fit a lot. And then this is a faster fit with the nano instead of the third entropic. Obviously, you get the A-type MWD and a different MSC from that, and obviously a lot better fitting. Now, the issue with the Kikimora is twofold. First is that tracking is double the wolf, double the retribution, double the claw, and still 100 better than the Crusader. Now, you could nerf the tracking, but obviously that has a lot of roll-on effects because the Kiki doesn't get a specific bonus for it. So instead, I think it could do with a nerf to speed or range. So right now it's 2800 or 3000 for the faster fit. Now that means that the faster fit is faster than a post-nerf retribution, and even the tanky fit is very similar to a post-nerf cheap retribution, which I think is absurd considering it's effectively a faction destroyer versus a frigate. Now, my ideal situation is a 20 base speed nerf. It means that you lose 170 meters a second on the slow fit, and you lose about 200 meters a second on the fast fit. Alternatively, a range decrease, it's about 11%, and that's from changing the existing 20% per level to 15% per level. It's not a massive change, but it just gives a retribution options, or other frigates like a slicer options where they can try kite you around at the 45 to 50 kilometer mark where you can't shoot them, especially with the speed nerf. But yeah, the Kikimora right now, it basically invalidates any other frigates within 50k's, which is almost all of them, and same with almost all destroyers as well. I just don't feel that it's a very balanced ship. It suffers from power creep. Now, if you have any other ideas for fixes, I'm certainly happy to hear them. I just think that the existing fixes, they don't fix anything. They make it worse for newer players that can't run snakes with an expensive retribution to fix its issues. and especially with the rumored ship mutaplasmids, I think it's going to get horrendously broken. Um, but yeah, like that's just my opinion. I'm not the most experienced player. Uh, I just like to poke around in Python and mess around with the attributes to see what changes will bring. So we'll see what CCP do.